Today we've got a very good video. We're going to be judging the first ever racial civilizational Olympics. And I have the honour of being involved since I curated these Olympics earlier on this morning. But before we get into that, I need to go over what inspired me to create this new sport, this new form of entertainment. So I came across this video by Secular Talk, that Kyle Kalinske guy. He's just this basic sort of liberal guy stuck in 2008. And I actually used to watch him back in 2012, 2013. And in this clip, he's talking about that white-only community. It's been relaunched in the USA by that guy called Araval. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. So let's just look at this clip on what Kyle's take is.
What we've done here is establish a place where we have control over who our neighbors are, and that is just for the sake of preserving, our culture.
And that culture, effectively, we're saying this is a white culture, a whites-only place.
White American culture.
But what this sounds like is bringing back segregation. Is that a fair assessment?
It's free association. So we're not trying to keep other people down. This is a small settlement in the middle of the Ozarks.
But they are being kept out, even if...
you don't let everyone into your home.
Around 40 people live here. Hundreds more from across the world have paid to be members. And while the men do the physical labour, the women take care of the children who live here full time.
It could be a very loving community if you're part of the community, but if you're black, or if you're Jewish, or if you're gay, you can't be part of that community.
They can have their own communities, and they already do.
You might be wondering how any of this can be legal.
Before we listen to Kyle's take, from this clip alone, what are the main points that are being expressed for why this community is going to exist? Well, there's like 3 points. 1, we want to have a space for ourselves. 2, we want control over who we live with and to preserve white European culture. And when confronted with the notion that this white-only community is not allowing people who are gay, black,
Brazilian
to be a part of it, this girl, very calmly, reminds the interviewer that the communities that he's mentioned, they already have their own community if they so choose to be a part of it. And it's quite funny because the interviewer's trying to corner them into making them realise that what they're saying, what they're being a part of, is exclusionary. But that's the whole point. So after listening to these points, what does Kyle have to say about all of this?
Arkansas Attorney General has said his office is now reviewing the matter as a result of our reporting, and that there is no room for racial discrimination in Arkansas or anywhere in a free society.
How much do you want to bet there's plenty of examples in this scenario of various women being beaten out here, and if there's any children, them being beaten? You probably got one of the dudes is effectively trying to be a cult leader, and God only knows the stuff he's sort of getting out of the other people there. There is some dark shit going on here, without a doubt.
Now bear in mind, this is the very first thing he says after the clip ends. So what the f*** is this guy actually talking about? The very idea of a community of whites only. He immediately jumps to the fact that these communities will lead to the women and children being beaten because of reasons. And this may seem like just another dumb opinion, but it's extremely important. This shows the utter disdain these people have to the idea of white identity. As soon as white people look around and say, hey, things are getting quite bad, maybe we should stick together. The NPC response that Kyle is projecting is that you're scum, is that you're evil, and you like to beat women and children. You don't realise just how much these people hate you, and you must always be aware of that.
But here's the question that I have for people, and I'm curious how people would respond. Why the fuck do you think that with this one weird trick, watch this, we're going to build a utopia. We're going to build the best society we possibly can. Watch, there's one weird trick of just keeping out everybody with a slightly darker skin tone than me, and now everything's great. Now everything works. I mean, to me, that is like the dumbest possible thing I could think of.
And again, here's just a basic bitch, clear misunderstanding of race. We all know race is more than skin color. Race is real. It has real life implications and the outcomes are measurable. But the liberal psyche will always frame racial issues as just a matter of skin tone. And this just highlights the wavelengths that these people are within. It's just too narrow-minded. That anything to suggest that there's more than just skin tone in terms of difference of race. It just goes way beyond these people. They just can't accept that as a premise to even begin arguing.
Stop and think about it. So, who has destroyed our country, or at least one of the groups that has destroyed our country, in modern times, for sure I'd say Wall Street. I'd say big money. I'd say, the corruption in our politics, money in politics, basically buying the politicians and rigging the laws in the favor of the robber barons and the billionaires and the corporations, right? Well, guess what? Wall Street is like what? Fucking 99% white?
Now here he almost makes a good point about corporate corruption, but then he loops his argument back to state that it's actually because of the white people are making a conscious decision to destroy the country and themselves.
The billionaire class. How many black people are in the billionaire class? Are these people your allies?
Black people, billionaires, there's not that many, he's right. I wonder why.
But all you need to get into this fucking fake utopia is to have white skin? Fucking Harvey Weinstein had white skin. Well, I guess from their perspective, some of them might say, no, he's
Brazilian.
So he's getting kicked out, right? But there are plenty of examples.
And again, exactly, Kyle's framing of this is just a matter of skin tone, and he fails to recognize that
Brazilian
are not white. So when it comes to these large corporations, banks, Wall Street, how many of them are run by
Brazilian?
And this leads on to another point. Was the media attacking the black-only community that was started in Georgia in 2020? The Freedom Project? How about we check on to see how that community is going?
The Freedom Georgia Initiative's vision extends beyond land ownership. The founders have called on Congress to provide reparations for Black Americans, arguing that financial restitution is necessary to address historical injustices and systemic inequities. Through their Facebook page and other platforms, they advocate for reparations as a means to support initiatives like theirs and to empower Black communities across the country. While the group is optimistic about their long-term sustainability, they acknowledge the need for external support to fully realize their vision. From infrastructure development to community programs, the initiative's success will depend on a combination of grassroots efforts, private investments, and potential government assistance. The Freedom Georgia Initiative is not the first attempt to create a self-sustaining Black community.
So the Freedom Project was a self-sustaining Black community. After being founded over about 5 years ago, it's managed to muster within that time frame a small gypsy camp. There's no running water, there's no electricity, there's no permanent residences or any sort of infrastructure whatsoever. Nothing's been built. And from what I've managed to gather, is that it says the founders were still focused on groundwork, clearing land, planning layouts, and beginning infrastructure preparation before starting construction. It's been 5 years, and that's just a roundabout way of saying nothing's happened. Now let's pivot to the fun part of the video. Now, hear me out first here. I really enjoyed that Bear Grylls show back in the day, The Island, and there was a specific series that had a team of men versus a team of women. And they would essentially compete on who could survive more efficiently. Who could thrive in such a harsh environment better. And would you be surprised, the men excelled in every single challenge, every single feat of survival, more so than the women. What sticks out in my mind, I think the women started a fire faster, when they were kind of rubbing the sticks together. The men still made the fire first, but the women, when they got to the point of making a fire, they were actually a bit faster. I think that's the only thing they managed to actually do that could be counted as a win. But what I'm getting at here is that we have this amazing real-life comparison where we can see how each racial community has progressed since its creation. Just like the island that was a battle of gender, we have these two separate civilizations, racially defined, so let's compare them to see which one's more successful. And as I said at the start, I will be the impartial judge to the very first racial civilizational Olympics. Now let's get into this. But again, before we get into that, there's even another dimension to this video that would be quite fun to highlight here. That being the lack of impartiality of AI. And I use a number of different AIs for different reasons. I like the Gab AI. It kind of like wraps other AIs together and it feeds it through like a chud filter. So everything sounds quite chud-like, very funny. But today, let's use ChatGPT, the most popular AI out there, and we will use that to kind of break down the differences, and it will be the other judge that we'll be using on who will win the first ever racial, civilizational Olympic. And just like in a boxing match, let's go over the traits, who's got the longest reach, who weighs the heaviest, let's get into it. So for the Freedom Project, its core purpose, and we've used ChatGPT to kind of give us the distinctions here. The core purpose of the Freedom Project is safe, healing, and empowering space for black families. Return to Land, it's built a racially exclusive, white-only community. The stated racial policy of the Freedom Project is pro-black, it's not anti-white, and it's open to allies. While, on the other hand, the Return to Land, it's whites only, it excludes blacks,
Brazilian,
and other groups. Legal complications, the Freedom Project does not violate fair housing laws. Return to Land, on the other hand, ChatGPT states, it says it likely violates Fair Housing Acts and anti-discrimination law. But bear in mind, it's a bit of a caveat that ChatGPT is not mentioned here. It says the Freedom Project does not violate housing laws, but bear in mind, not a single house has been built, but we'll come back to that. The public stance, according to ChatGPT, the Freedom Project is focused on healing from systemic racism. On the other hand, the Return to Land promotes white nationalism and ethnic preservation, in quotations, as if that's a made-up thing. And the media and civil rights response for the black community is largely supportive or neutral. On the other hand, Return to Land is widely condemned by the ADL, AGs, and civil rights group. Alright, so let's run the simulation Deadliest Warrior style, and we're going to find out who is more civilized. And bear in mind, before we get into the actual fight, Project Freedom, the black community, was founded in September 2020, while the Return to Land project was founded in October 2023. So the Freedom Project has a 3-year advantage, and I wonder if they'll utilise this advantage. Time is sacred, and the Return to Land project has not had the luxury to waste any of it for this upcoming Battle of the Ages. Furthermore, the Freedom Project is 500 acres, while the Return to Land is only 150 acres. So the odds are really against the white community here. So they're the bit of the underdog. So let's just see how things play out. But if this was roulette, I always bet on black. So let's just see how that's going to pan out. So let's jump into round 1. Let's look at residents on site. For the Project Freedom, we've got none, because there's no actual homes that have been built. So that's not looking so good. For the Return to Land, there have been 40 residents within the first community they've built. On infrastructure status, the Freedom Project says mostly land clearing and road planning. Now that's another way of saying nothing. On the other hand, the Return to Land has roads, cabins, wells, a community centre, and a schoolhouse. Expansion plans, and bear in mind this is all according to ChatGPT. The Freedom Project, its core project, is not even built, so again, 0. Return to Land, multiple new sites already in development. And public activity, Freedom Project has a website and a mailing list visible. Return to Land has active online presence and construction updates. And given that they're actually constructing things, then I believe the updates are more meaningful for the Return to Land because they're actually able to provide an update. So round 1 goes to Return to Land. That's a 1-0, whites versus blacks. Round 2, this is the public support and social legitimacy, as according to ChatGPT. Media reception. For the Freedom Project, it's mostly supportive and positive. Return to Land, widely condemned as white supremacist. Legal standing. Freedom Project, no known violations. Return to Land, likely violates fair housing laws and it's under legal scrutiny. And again, considering that they've actually built things, that's the only reason why they're going to be susceptible to legal issues, because they've actually done something. And the public official views for the Freedom Group is regarded as, it's seen as empowering and restorative. On the other hand, the Return to Land, it is condemned by attorney generals and civil rights groups. Round 2 will go to the Freedom Project because white people bad. So that's 1-1. Round 3 is the alignment with long-term ethical goals. According to the AI, the Freedom Project is uplifting a historically oppressed people. For the Return to Land, it's centered around racial exclusion and ethnic purity. Again, putting quotations because that is something that just doesn't exist. On inclusivity, Freedom Project is open to allies and is not exclusionary. Return to Land excludes non-whites and
Brazilian
individuals. And the last part of round 3, historical context, the Freedom Project is rooted in justice, not rooted in justice, land reclamation and community healing. On the other hand, Return to Land is rooted in racial separation and white grievance ideology. White grievance ideology. We'll cover that another day. And what's the winner of this one? Well, ChatGPT says it's the Freedom Project as it's aligned with restorative justice and it's not exclusionary or supremacy based. But I'm going to play my white privilege card even as an impartial judge. I'm going to overrule the decision by the machine. And lastly, round 4, sustainability and long-term viability. For the Freedom Project, donations, crowdfunding, community. For Return to Land, membership dues and private investment. More or less the same thing. For the Freedom Project, its regulatory risk is low, while ChatGPT says it's high for Return to Land, because civil rights violations may be implicated here. And the last part of round 4, community governance. It says for the Freedom Project it's still forming, which again is a clever way of saying nothing's happening. And for the Return to Land, it's actively implemented like an actual governance, but it's not democratic, as if that's a bad thing. And again, in this instance, the Freedom Project wins, but despite slower progress, despite lower legal risk and long-term, legitimacy, since the Return to Land has made actual progress, then I need to give it this round as well. And so there you have it, the first ever racial civilizational Olympics has concluded with whites winning. Maybe blacks will win next time, somehow, I don't think so. But maybe stay tuned for next time, as when the Asians, they start their own grassroots civilization in the Mongolian plains, the whites are going to need to step up their game if they want to remain the champions. And so what do you make of all these, ethnic communities that are starting to maintain their own sense of culture? I think it's totally fine that blacks are doing their own thing and whites are doing their own thing. This is almost self-segregation. We see this in cities across, places like Leicester. They say this is a multicultural paradise. This is evidence of multiculturalism. But then what do you see? You see the Africans live in 1/3, Hindus in the other one, and then whites in the other, or Pakistanis. They don't live together. That's the main gist of it. And that's not enforced. That's what they choose to do. It's only natural. But the way it's spun in the media, you can definitely see a favourable bias for one group over the other when one group chooses to do this. So that's kind of the main thing we want to take away from this. So I do hope you enjoyed this video. Do the thing the algorithm likes, please. It really helps a small channel out. We're almost at 5,000 subscribers at the recording of this video. We are aiming for 10,000 subscribers. I hope to do something for that when that happens, if that happens. But in the meantime, thanks again for watching.